Good. I will assume that we now have viewers online. If we do have viewers online, this is a rather bad Radio 4 continuity announcement. I am sorry for the late start of the service, but you are very welcome to be joining us online, as are the people in the room who have always been in the room. But welcome to the public board meeting of Oxleas. And we're going to be picking up with apologies for absence, any new declarations of interest. Sally, do we have apologies?
It's Rachel T. Evans.
Rachel T. Evans is, thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, are people happy that this is an accurate record of them? Thank you very much. Matters arising from the minutes, they are at the moment that they are all complete and moving forward. Do people have any questions or queries about the matters arising?
Yeah, so just that point I mentioned pre-meeting about we've got the data for Oxleas for the Oliver McGowan training, but I'd be interested in finding out what that was across the ICS. I don't know if we've got access to that, because I do think I was concerned when I saw the rollout of that training. It says, it's for trust to sort of direct as appropriate. And I think a lot of the issue is, I think acute trusts don't necessarily think it is appropriate for their staff, and I think it's absolutely appropriate for their staff. So that would be good to get that. And
could we do that? Or try it, see what we can do in that terms. Thank you. Nina.
Two things. On the last item, the board to receive further information about the role of the PNAs. I thought the discussion that we had at the last board meeting was to bring something back to board, not to the individual committees.
Yes, I think the PNAs are a good thing. I wonder whether it would be useful to have one of the early, have them as a show and tell, so to speak, would be nice, because I think that it's a positive story, but also a story that we should know about. So would that be possible? Would that deal with that, Nina?
I think it would be incredibly valuable if we
Thank
could.
You.
Yeah.
If we could do that as a show and tell, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And just linked to that, at the most recent Council of Governors in June, there was an incredibly powerful presentation by the lead for adult ADHD. Forgive me, I can't remember his, but yes. And it would be fantastic for us to be able to hear that kind of example of innovation in how we deliver services at board. So I don't know if there's space on one of the future kind of away day agendas.
Can we consider that, Sally?
Yeah, all we could.
Okay. I think it would be useful for us, especially as we bed in our new strategy and look at the innovation element of the new strategy, about how we find good evidence, what is the good evidence of the stuff that we're already doing and surfacing that. So I think we need to think about some way we'll do that. Alison.
Yeah, so we will be focusing at the AMM on digital. We're going to be doing some showcasing and some sessions to get people's views on a new strategy and how we work digitally with patients in the future. Karen will be coming along talking about the voice recognition technology. Dragon will be demonstrating that. And we've got a number of other clinicians that we're teeing up to.
Okay. So we're covering that to some extent in the annual meeting, but also I think this idea of how do we surface innovation that we're already doing and talk about it and know about it, I think, and then disseminate it, I think would be good for us to perhaps think about. So, Sally, thank you.
It's even on that particular point.
Thank
because
you.
It works for us. Says brilliant.
Thank you.
Remember eventually. We also have an SLP innovation event in November as well with the SLP. So there'll be opportunities there as well to see a lot of the QI projects and have a board discussion there.
So what event will that be? I didn't quite catch.
The SLP innovation event, which is being held at the Oval in November.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Neil, service user and carer involvement focus. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm just going to share my screen and be broadcasting through there. So I'm very pleased to be presenting a piece of co-production from the Bromley ResearchNet group. ResearchNet is one of our oldest prototypes for involvement. It involves groups which meet together regularly, design projects with staff, and support each other through a number of ways. So they're volunteer groups. They're now absorbed into Involve. This particular project, I think, gives us an example of how we might be an actor at place in a very, very interesting way. But I think one thing that I want to focus on is I think it is something of a masterclass of co-production. So just going through the project. Oops. There. So just in terms of the co-production approach, you'll have seen in your papers the work that they did, but just to break this down in terms of good practice for co-production. What was interesting to me was that staff identified that there was a real lull at particular times of day in service users attending. It's not possible for staff to see the reasons for that. And if we had acted on our understanding, we might have done things like arrange the reception in a different way or perhaps look at the appointment system. But good co-production involves defining the problem together, not just bringing people in to look at the solution. So it was when they asked the ResearchNet group that actually the problem laid outside of the service and was to do with intimidation, harassment and bullying from school children on buses of our service users who have visible disabilities. That's really important because that's formulating the problem in a co-productive way. You see that actually it's a much better location of where we're going to target the intervention. Then they moved to design together with staff an intervention which is not within the service, but I think is at place. And I just put up the basics of it. So this was an interactive workshop based around a film that ResearchNet made about their experience of traveling on buses and of being bullied. So I think it's really nice the steps that they've taken. So they would start with introductions and then they'd go straight to a game. Oh, I meant to say that this would be with year 6 children. Wonder if year 6 is the optimal place to go in, really. I think that could be a very interesting question to explore. But they started with a very quite lightweight approach, which was to ResearchNet to talk about their experience of bullying and then to move straight to a game of guess what my interests are. So it was a chance to just humanize everyone. You know, what are my interests? You know, what am I beyond my disability? Then they showed a film called Bullying on the Bus, which, by the way, we're looking to get permissions so that we can share that here. That doesn't have permission for public showing yet. Followed by small group work at tables between members of ResearchNet and the school kids, and then a whole Q&A session. And then I think probably a really good message ending with goodie bags. I mean, it's a very interesting process because it positions our service users as giving something, not as taking something, and not as asking for special treatment. The film that I want to show you now, just to say that we did collect some feedback from schools, and I think the kids were profoundly moved. There was extremely good behavior in the class. It was very, very cooperative, and that's something that's mentioned by our service users in the film. So ResearchNet have made a film just about their experience to share with you now. So I'm hoping the technology will work. Fingers crossed. So it's about 5 minutes.
My name is Trace.
My name is Kimberly. Most people just call me Kim.
Louise Bell. David. My name is Laura.
I'm volunteer at ResearchNet. We do multiple projects. I teach children about anti-bullying.
We do projects for schools for anti-bullying.
We talk about different projects.
I help at ResearchNet with work on project to help people with learning disabilities.
We explain to children how to get help because if they don't know how to report it. They might be frightened, they might be scared to report it.
Because I wanted to help people to know what it feels like to be bullied, especially for me, because I shall say it, a disfigured hand. And when you got that, if people don't understand what they see, they make fun of it.
To teach children about anti-bullying and to teach them not to be bullies themselves.
To be safe in school, you don't get bullied.
Do people with learning disabilities get bullied, do you think?
Yeah.
Make them understand what it's like to have a disability so that they can see it, what it used to with me, because I used to feel that I wasn't like them. That was the worst.
Can help the kids to understand how the way we are and the conditions what we have to make them understand a lot better. It will be a little easier for us.
It's good to teach kids at that age what a learning disability is, and we're no different, and we should be treated with dignity and respect like any other person.
We would anti-bullying film. The film was about bullying on buses. I helped make these video. I was the bus driver.
Did a presentation about the past and how people with disabilities were in institutions.
How to be aware and how to step up against bullies.
We taught children about anti-bullying and we handed out goodie bags.
We showed them different cards, what place you can get bullied, and they point the cards.
So we spoke about different places you can get bullied.
We showed them on a video, and they have to guess all their pictures.
That was the What We Have in Common game.
We split into groups. We played that stack game, we had to match the pairs up.
Just showed them, our stories. We did stories of ourselves and how we've had bullying happening with us.
The kids would be quiet and listen, and they be LBA.
It's a good one because it teaches children not to be bullied themselves.
Teach children about anti-bullying. Getting the game plan, help them explain to them and things like that. I like to go gigs.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
I like that we're able to show the community that having a learning disability doesn't make you less human, and also having a learning disability doesn't make you any different to a person that doesn't have a learning disability.
I think there's many things to congratulate our learning disability colleagues with this, and I think an example of an intervention at place where we might find a voice, but also I think just of, in my view, real deep co-production. So I'll just open that to questions or comments.
Thank you, Neil. As well.
Thanks. What I was really interested in was reading the pack. It looked like it was just one school. So it was clearly you'd have people coming in on all types of bus routes if they were coming in to see our services. So is there any plans, do you know, for ResearchNet to spread that? And how long do we think that would take? And are they, I hadn't realised that they'd already made a film. So it was really useful to see that, because that was going to be one of my comments. Could we use films to get it out into more schools?
Yes, so definitely. So when I spoke to the ResearchNet team, that is the plan, to keep rolling this out. I think it was you can see it's an enormous amount of work to get it to a stage, but once it's there, it's a product ready to go, and I think the team like it. So that's the plan, is to keep rolling this out.
Suzanne?
Thank you, and I think this is a really impressive project, and I'd love for the ResearchNet people involved in that to know that that was the view of the board. One of the things that struck me was that in the recent project that I did for the policing ethics panel, we were looking at school policing, and police are very well aware of the difficulties for people on public transport, whether they have a learning disability or not, around school hours, and they organise their policing to ensure, or to endeavour to ensure, that public transport is safe around school hours, whether for school children or for other people. And I do think that we should engage with them. I think it would be really, really useful for police to have the sort of insight that a learning disability group can offer them about the particular challenges for people with learning disabilities. I would love this to be shared with the Met Police. I would be very happy to facilitate that. I know that there's a limited resource in our ResearchNet, but I think this is happening all over London. It happens at specific times, and I think that if we've done some good work on this, it would be a fabulous thing to showcase.
Thank you. If we could take that forward, that would be great. I'm going to do Sophie, Ian, and then Jane.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add, brilliant example of co-production. And yeah, just thinking about replication and scale as well, because it did really strike home what we're talking about inequalities. If this is having an impact on how many people with learning disabilities attend appointments, for example, then that's going to presumably have a very clear impact on their health. So is there any way that we could contribute to any research on this? What are the outcomes of this? I realise this is just one school at the moment, one project, but it did strike me that there is the potential there to demonstrate a direct outcome. And the other thing about partnership working, I completely agree with Suzanne about sharing with the police, with the transport service as well, and with schools and with the voluntary sector. Are there any partners we can look for who could help promote this and pick this up and deliver this more widely? Because I just think it's a brilliant innovation and it could have such a great impact.
Thank you. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, like other colleagues, I thought it was a fantastic film. And just to pick up on some of the points that other colleagues have made, I know Lorraine is with us today, but I seem to remember that this is a conversation that has been had within Bromley Place. So I think there is a link to this, the work that Neil and ResearchNet have done back into conversations that have been generated there. So there's a good kind of system understanding of the need to do something about it. But I also seem to remember we have quite a lot of intelligence, for example, about particular bus routes, particular schools, and the directorate itself has had to kind of work around kind of school closing times when they have been offering appointments. So I think there is quite a lot of intelligence that now we've done this piece of work, we can then use to spread it further.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Just to build on that, we are active members and partners for Safeguarding Adults and Safeguarding Children. And within those partnerships, there are a huge number of agencies and organisations that would probably bite our arm off to be able to promote this. So I think it would be really helpful if we could share it with them and offer to seek their support with widening that.
Is that better? Sorry. 2 points is just following on the targeted approach. I mean, to get the best outcomes, if we can have a more targeted approach to this and actually see where the problems are. And secondly, I think you mentioned it yourself, our year six is the best target group to go after. My personal experience probably is probably not. I mean, maybe for the future, but if you want to address the problem now, and if you did go after secondary school children, would the workshop have to be different? Would the product have to be somewhat different to meet their needs and actually speak to them?
Thank you. Neil, anything you want to come back on?
No, really helpful ideas for expanding what is a sort of prototype intervention, isn't it? And I think the last thing I would just reflect on is I thought it was very interesting that they were saying that it helped the school children talk about their experience of bullying as well. So it was not a one-way street, but this going out with these targeted conversations. Yeah, I think there's a lot to explore, and I'll share the film with ResearchNet with some of these great ideas.
Thank you. And I think if you could pass on our thanks, because the people around the table have clearly been moved by the film. And I think the question is, how do we get this now into the next stage, not massify it, but get it and get it so that it's more effective by working out how to do it in partnership and things. So a lot of enthusiasm for that. So thank you. And we look forward to hearing about that. I don't think necessarily formally, but informally going forward, how we push that out. Thank you. Okay, just to let people know, I'm planning a coffee break about 11:30, just so people can time their caffeine levels or whatever it is they need. But whether we get there depends on other people. Iffy, over to you.
Don't worry, I shan't keep us. We'll get to 11:30 swiftly. So this is the board assurance framework. It's a brief report, just a few things to highlight from my perspective. There are 13 risks, and we know that each board committee reviews its risks, but the next full review will be at our November board meetings. Just wanted to draw attention to a few things. The risk 2472 on the triangle of care. I think that there needs to be further discussion about the nature of the risk. Is it the impact? Is it how a failure to engage family and the patient, the impact on outcomes for patients? Is it about the effect on carers and support network, etc.? So I think that just needs to be clarified, as well as the mitigation, because I think this has been around for a long time. And how do we then measure progress towards achieving a situation where for everyone we look after, there's real connectivity between the clinician, the patient, and their key carers. I don't think this is a discussion or a debate about whether it's the right thing to be on the BAF, because if you look at SIs, if you look at complaints, lots of evidence where we don't always get it right, so we just need to be sure about what work we need to do. The second is about cyber, and Alison often smiles when I say we've all accepted it. It's not about will it happen, but it's about when it happens. But I just wanted to make the point that it's fine that we've moved the risk to significant, but to my mind, that's not quite enough. So what is it we're going to do differently in terms of trying to push back as far as possible when it happens. So it's about some of those things that your team, Alison, and we expect of staff in terms of phishing emails and letting staff know what the risks are, but also the resilience of our business continuity plans. As we've seen from the cyber synovies, that if it happens to our real system, for example, that would be devastating. But we need to carry on providing services. That's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Thank you, Ife. Any questions, comments, Suzanne?
Thank you, Ife. I'm really pleased that the carers and I always get confused about the name of the group. So it's the shadow committee, which is service users and carers. They worked really hard on this risk. I think that they've brought something very important to our attention. I'm delighted that it's now on the BAF, because I think that that will enable us to pull together resources across the organisation. I've had a discussion with Neil, who will be sort of leading on coordinating the risk. We'll look at the nature of the framing of the risk and the mitigations again at the Quality Committee, and are expecting that through a process that takes place between now and the end of the year, we will have ensured that all of the relevant clinical leads, directorates and so on are brought into a narrative around how this risk needs to be tackled. But I'm very pleased it's on the BAF.
Thank you. Jim?
Just a quick question on the Synovis cyber attack. I've read in the paper that, normal service is still not resumed and is unlikely to be resumed until sort of end of August, September, October. From my point of view, I haven't heard very much about why. Why is it such a devastating attack? And if it's such a devastating attack, where is our, not in Oxleas, within the ICS? This is likely to happen again. And I just don't see very much discussion going on. Maybe it's at the exec and not dead at the board, but I'll see. I'm talking to Abby.
Jane and I attend 2 meetings weekly and we have since the attack in June. I think it's incorrect to say normal service hasn't resumed. I think what is outstanding is the blood transfusion part of it, and until that is completed, it's included in it not being business as usual. So they've had mutual aid since the incident, which means some of our urgent and routine blood tests have been able to be done. We've gone back to Synovis themselves, SynLab, providing that service to Bexley and Greenwich about 2 weeks ago, and Bromley and Lewisham will go towards the end of this month. But it's actually the blood transfusion, and the reason is that they had to rebuild some of their systems, and Alison will know more about the technical details. So I think the concern for us is, what do we do, or how do we prepare for this, even with our business continuity plans? And that's a discussion that we're still having, because we don't want to have shadow IT, but there's some things you won't know, or you won't be able to mitigate against, because we just don't have that information in any other format apart from digital. So it's something we need to consider, especially because of the clinical risk associated with that.
Yes.
Just a couple of comments. So on the uprating of the cyber risk, that's not been through Business and Infrastructure Committee yet. So we need to give that a good go next meeting, I think, this month's meeting. It seems perfectly sensible to me. I think we'd asked exec to consider that wider sort of business continuity, what happens if something far removed happens. So I don't know when that will come back to Business and Infrastructure, but that would be good, I think, because I think we felt that was somewhat in a different nature.
I think we also need to look at our business continuity in terms of how long. So you've got the immediate business continuity, what takes place within your first 14 days. But if the incident progresses much longer, how do you mitigate for that? I think that's a learning from us with these kind of incidents.
Alice.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things, aren't there? There is prevention. So how do we ensure that we're doing everything we can do to prevent a cyber attack? And, you know, there are clearly things that need to be done, certainly with our supplier base, to ensure that we are working with them to prevent attacks. One of the, as part of the data security protection toolkit now, that every supplier should be working towards multi-factor authentication, which we know is one of the key pieces of functionality that you need to have in place to defend against a cyber attack. All of the nuances of what happened with Snovis I have yet to learn, but there's a lot of work going on centrally within NHS England. I've just got an invite today to a cyber improvement system workshop, and the ICS are very focused on this. They've just appointed a new cyber lead and are developing a cyber strategy, and we're kind of dovetailing our strategies into that. So there is a lot of work going on. I think our biggest risk though is with suppliers, and we are working within the organisation to expand the work that we are doing with those leads within services who look after those systems. So I think it is a multi-pronged approach in terms of what we need to do, and that work is ongoing.
All I'd add to that is neither of the two recent cyber attacks were our suppliers. They do supply services, but we don't have a contractual arrangement with them. So there's a whole identification piece there as well. And as a system understanding who is taking on that responsibility, because I think that was the thing that kind of surprised me, you know, in terms of this is, you know, quite remote contractual arrangements having such a direct impact on what we do.
Yes, Jane.
Thank you. As well as the business continuity as a system, we've been really focused on looking at harms that have potentially actually occurred in real time, but also we're closely monitoring harms that might happen to people as a result of not receiving routine tests or timely care. So I think it would be really important to make sure our business continuity plans reflect something about monitoring harm over time as a system. I'm happy to say we as an organisation haven't had any significant harms. We had a few cancelled foot surgery operations, and you know, the teams have coped phenomenally well in managing the reintroduction of routine bloods in Bexley and Greenwich. Bromley should come back fairly soon.
So one of the things I'm hearing before I turn to the screen, one of the things I'm hearing is there a need for us as a board to maybe, once the synovius has died down a little bit more, really look at board level at our business continuity and check that, you know, and review that, because it seems that is a key thing that's emerging, and later on we'll look at some ICT strategy, but actually I think there's that business continuity. However high we build the wall, somebody will get over it. Somebody will knock out the sewer system because of the sewer system's arrangement with their contractors, so that might be important. So if we put that on it. Manisa?
Yeah, just, I mean, this may pick up in the piece of work that you just mentioned, but in addition to the level of security, making sure we have information about what suppliers other partners are using, because say with cyanosis, we relied on mutual aid, but if you had you know, a provider that ends up covering all of London or something, so it's not just looking at ours, but also how our suppliers compare to others, so we can understand what backup plans we have if something happens.
Alison.
I think the Synovis incident highlighted the ability that we currently have in the system with resilience, because we have different providers at play. So in Lewisham, there's a different provider to that the Prue and Guys and Tommy's use. So there was some resilience within the system because tests could be sent elsewhere. And, you know, we all know the conversations that have been happening about potentially having one system provider for London, and there are some benefits to that, but there's also a huge amount of cons as well, cyber being one of them. But in terms of thinking about the business continuity plans, I think services have business continuity plans in place, but historically they have been in place thinking about short-term issues. So, we take down the system for a day to do an upgrade, or we have a power blip, and in those circumstances, from our infrastructure perspective, if we had a problem here, we could flip over to Pinewood. So we know that we have resilience. It will take a little bit of time, but we can restore quite quickly. What we're seeing now with these cyber attacks is and what SLAM experienced a couple of years ago, and obviously with Synovis, is that the resilience has to be for longer periods of time. So we've kicked off those conversations at the senior staff event around longer term business continuity planning, but I think it's still a work in progress.
So Alison, when would be a good time for us to, because we don't want to do it too prematurely, but when do you think those discussions will be at a stage where it would be useful to bring to board?
But I don't think we have finished articles at the moment.
Can I perhaps can we leave that to the exec team to work out when would be a good time to bring that to board? And I think your argument at Chronic, I mean, that this computer virus is often compared to my area about immunology, but in the immunology land, we often, what people forget is the population level, which is actually much more like we're at, where you start talking about things like herd immunity and chronic inflammation and things like that. This is the sort of land where I feel very at home in. So unfortunately, so I think there is stuff to be in here. Okay, anything else about the BAF? Steve?
With the speaker, but subject to Joe's agreement, I think the business and infrastructure on 17th of September. I know you probably haven't got time to do a full report, but I think it might be useful to have an exploratory discussion started there, just to start getting some views about business, what we want to look at business continuity.
That would be helpful to know the stage of business. Good, thank you. That would be helpful. Thank you. We'll move on now to the chair's report. I'm not going to say very much because I think much of the background, if he's covering a lot of the details, if he's covering his one. At the risk of over-reflecting, I do notice that the last board meeting was held at the day of the election. And as you think what's happened the last 2 months, we've got a new government, we've had social unrest, we've had the Olympics, we've now Paralympics, we've had a rather brief summer in the middle of all of that, and we're dealing with the consequences of the cyber attack. And I just say this to say that actually the world we are living in, this constant change, this constant stuff happening is a new way. And it does make me think whether we need to think more carefully about how we respond to the different environments we find ourselves in. We often in the NHS are behaving in, what would be called in business terms, simple or clear environments and complicated environments. I think often we are going to be more and more dealing with complex and hopefully never chaotic environments, but thinking around those different ways in which you decision make in those environments might be something that we need to do going forward and be more explicit about that. Other than that, from my point of view, I've really enjoyed and benefited from continuing to meet Oxleas teams in all sorts of different ways. And now what I'm working on as well with the help of the executives is meeting teams underneath them that are perhaps not the obvious teams to meet, but meeting the teams underneath. And so I've approached several execs who will be approaching other execs in time to meet teams that they're involved in. Also so that the execs are aware that I'm meeting with the non-execs as a whole in between board meetings as well, which I think is a way as well for us to share information and triangulate data as well as meeting with the execs. There have been some really fun events. I think probably the funnest one was the Preceptorship Week. I don't know what it is about the people who lead the Preceptorship, but they are just mad in the nicest possible sense of the word. And they got me doing some mad things as well. So there you go. but on video I see they got other people of the team also doing things. I've been engaging the stakeholders both in NHS land, but also partner organisations. I think that there's some really good work that we're doing with partnership organisations and with the council. At the next development board, what I'm planning to do, and we've discussed, is that I'll be taking stock of some of what I've been seeing in the period of time since I've started, and then having some themes that we might build on in that developmental board. So I think a common theme I'm finding from the stakeholders is that we're regarded as a well-run organisation. The people who work with us, particularly the execs, are well regarded by the various organisations that we work with, and that's really strong. And of course, there are big dangers in that. There's the danger of complacency, but there's also, I think, the danger that we discussed on in our early reflection, almost of being ignored because we're not a problem. And that actually is a danger. And I think that that's something that we need to think about. But I'll stop there because I think Effie brings up many more of the big things that have been happening across the board. So unless anyone has any questions, I propose we move straight on to Effie. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to assume that board colleagues have my report. It's been read. I'd like to just focus on three things, if I may. So the first for me is the fact that we're probably going to now be able to provide services in the NHS without industrial action, at least not from junior doctors. I'm really hoping that the pay deal will be accepted. But of course, we still have GPs who are threatening action. And I do sincerely hope that that doesn't happen. The junior doctors' actions was estimated to have cost us 1.9 billion, which is rather unfortunate. And that's just the money that's been spent, etc. We haven't even talked about the harm that it's caused, and I expect that many lives, many premature deaths would have occurred on account of that. So the GP action just doesn't bear any thought, and so we're going to keep hoping that the government will find a solution where that then doesn't become the new thing that plagues the NHS. The second thing that I want to touch on is the review of mental health services at Nottinghamshire NHS Foundation Trust. I did need to rehearse the detail of that, but I think you see in my report that there are expectations of NHS England, ICS, and then our board. The immediate things we need to do are, of course, to make sure that we continue to provide services to all patients, but we need to identify patients who meet a certain criteria, and we've just about done that now. We need to reconcile that with ICS, and that needs to go back to NHS England. There's then the expectation that there will be a publication about standards of care for these sorts of patients. That I fear could take several months, and I don't think that the board will be happy for us to sit on our hands and say we know who these people are. Well, let's wait for the criteria. So there's a piece of work that Lorraine, Abby, and colleagues will be doing just to make sure that the people we've identified are having comprehensive care, and we're doing our best to mitigate risk. When the guideline is then published, we then need to check against what we're providing. Ian's report does, of course, give more detail, but I'll be happy to take any questions. And Lorraine is on the screen to also help. And the last thing I just want to mention is the fact that we have started the recruitment journey for 2 new NEDs. And I think this is going to be Stephen's last formal board. And I will no doubt, on behalf of the exec, want to thank Stephen, thank Joe too, for all you've done for Oxleas. Personally, I will miss you. There's no question about that. I'll miss both of you. But I thought I needed to use this opportunity to just say thank you. And there will be the opportunity to thank you properly. Where you go.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Iffy? Got some claps on the screen. Aswa, and then Nina, and then Joe.
You didn't pick it up in the commentary that you'd the highlighted pieces, but just within the report, we've got the piece about the CAMS waiting room, which was effectively put through via the LSL boroughs. And I was wondering, when do we think some of those resources will be available to BBG coming out of the London Listens piece of work? I don't know if anybody would know the answer to that.
I don't have an answer to that. Were you able to get anything from Lisa?
I haven't. They're all being put into action in different ways depending on the environment within the boroughs. So there are, in our boroughs, we particularly have the Thrive model. So I think it's developing in that way. But I haven't had more of an update from Lisa, but we can bring something back.
I just wanted to ask on the social unrest. I think it was brilliant that you did those 2 listening sessions. Did we actually have staff affected by behaviours in the services that we were providing? I'm just aware that friends who are doctors in Lewisham had people go up to them, and it was really it was the first experience that I've had of that in London. I just wondered if we'd experienced it.
No, certainly I don't think that anyone necessarily described having that experience, but there was a lot of fear. I'm trying to think. There was one particular lady whom I'm thinking now whether she was quite outspoken actually, and thought that we could have done things sooner than we did or quicker than we did. But I don't recall now whether she had anyone come to her. You may.
I think my recollection of the conversations was that it really changed the tenor of people's experiences, and so they were fearful in context they wouldn't have previously been fearful. They couldn't work out whether that was a change in the person that they were dealing with, or if it was them being more hyper aware of issues. But it certainly affected their confidence going into visits. It affected their fear of sitting in a car as people walk past. So there was a lot of fear. But they weren't completely clear whether or not that was a change in what they were encountering or whether it was a change in their levels of awareness.
My comment was just in relation to the Nottinghamshire work, and where I think some of the press comment on it has not been helpful as well. We talked about some external views earlier. Will the board be kept appraised of what goes on this? And what sort of order of magnitude of patients are we talking about within this category?
So the initial work, the initial review we've done is to, if you think about just people who have complex psychosis, including schizophrenia, who are difficult to engage, who don't comply with medication and have had multiple admissions, we have about 290 such patients. But in addition, we're looking at those patients who are already on community treatment orders, which, as you know, we tend to implement. And we've got about 100 people on community treatment orders. So this is the first cohort, which of course is about clinicians, teams identifying such patients. So the next thing is just to make sure that the care that they're getting from the MDT is comprehensive until, as I said, we have the national directive.
Suzanne?
So my question was about that as well. And it may be that we want to discuss it under Ian's section or deal with it all together here. I was curious to read that we don't have an assertive outreach anymore. And I don't know whether that's because the model was found not to be effective, because the commissioning patterns have changed, if we want to reintroduce it. And I'm just a little bit uncertain as to why it fell away as a model and whether we want to come back to it.
So I think Ian and I were trying to figure out why he fell away in Oxleas, but I think it's fair to say that there was a national move away from assertive outreach. From a personal point of view, I think that the reason for that was based on some research which looked at the outcomes, and the basis of that, to my mind, was flawed. The outcome being was the reduction in admission to hospital, because of course it would have been quite difficult to look at the outcome from the point of view of incidents such as homicides or suicides, given the small numbers. And that, I think, began that movement of people chipping away and saying, you know, is this really the right service? So, like many other trusts across the country, assertive outreach fell out of favor and so patients. But we clearly knew who our cohort were, and they were transferred to our community mental health teams with clarity about what the level of care should be. And that's part of what Lorraine and Abby and colleagues will look at, just to ensure that these 290 that we've identified continue to receive that. Now, your question about is there likely to be a move back to assertive outreach? I think that's been the mottering in different places based on this. And in fact, assertive outreach came out of a similar incident many years ago in southwest London, in southeast London, Lambeth. But what I don't know is whether there will be the resources to do that. And I mean that both in terms of money and staff to do that. I'm sure that part of our deliberations will be about, do we want to do that with this cohort? And if we do, how might we do it in Oxleas? Ian and colleagues have ideas of how we might do it, and Ian may want to share that here. But we also need to look more carefully across even existing teams. It was interesting that we talked about this at the senior staff event yesterday, and some colleagues who had worked in assertive outreach just made the point that what you need with all patients, particularly those with psychosis, is to engage them. That it's not absence of engagement. And a small piece of research that was done by the Early Intervention in Psychosis team in Bromley showed that those of them who were referred back to services into the community mental health team were those who were not engaged when they were in early intervention services. And so there's a real thing that we need to be thinking about. How do we support and help our staff to take engagement seriously? And I think that also speaks to that whole point about triangle of care, you know, where whoever is involved in their network is also engaged. I think Ian wants to add.
Yeah, thanks, Iffy. Absolutely agree with all that. And it's the bit that I wanted to come back in on engagement.
You're breaking up a little bit, Ian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, the bit I wanted to come back in on was the engagement bit. I mean, I think Lorraine and I have started to discuss what this kind of what's happened in Nottingham, what we need to reflect on in Oxleas. I think what she and I have been talking about is how, given that we don't have assertive outreach anymore, how do we create the conditions in our ICMP teams and our ComRes teams to really enable colleagues working there to really be able to focus on the relational aspects. So I think the way to do that is around looking at the skills of people, but also looking at the demands that we place on colleagues working in those teams and the size of caseloads currently. So one way through this may be to do a parallel piece of work to the one that was undertaken within ADAPT, to really kind of focus in on what we want the core business of ICMP to be. But of course, to do that, we really need to be able to return to some of those quite stuck issues around the role of primary care for people with long-term mental health conditions and how we can work with them better so that we are working in secondary care with the people that really, really need us. So I think there's a kind of contextual shift that will be necessary, and I hope that whatever direction we get, we'll pick up on this.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other comment? This is something that we're going to return to clearly going forward, Steve.
First of all, thank you for the kind words, Iffy, and looking forward to seeing you all at the October Development Day. Then just on the engagement piece and just to manage board expectations, the initial work that's being done by Abby outside of, well, as part of the NHSC presentation, but slightly different piece. What will be a rough timetable for that? How quickly can the board expect to see something coming back?
Yes. I need to meet with Lorraine first, so I don't, because it's 3 teams in each of our boroughs, so we're looking at patients within 9 teams or more or less. So, and if we're going to be working with staff, we just need to be realistic and look at what we have. I suppose an initial, if we say 3 months, then we can come back after that and review. Lorraine, I hope that's okay. I'm pulling a face if you can't see my face.
Let it be noted there were thumbs up on the screen. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Very helpful discussion. As I say, we will be coming back to this clearly. It's going to be a live issue for us and nationally. Okay, I'm going to suggest that we stop there for a break. Can we get back, just because we've still got quite a lot of business to do, can we aim to come back at 10:02? Would that be okay? Just a 10-minute leg stretch and charging coffee, and we will start again at 10 minutes to. Thank you, everyone. And others, I'm sure, will join us as and when, but Rachel's strategy.
It's going to be on Monday. Oh, thank you. So the launch is going to be on Monday. There'll be screensavers, videos, animations, a kind of summary document and the full document. And we'll also be sending out boxes to staff at home with a summary of the document, coupled with the wellbeing resources and some goodies for them to enjoy in a competition for children, that sort of thing, when they're reading it. So that'll go out in the next couple of weeks. Also sending out to all of our stakeholders, because we did engage a lot of people and get their views, so to make sure they're all thanked. But there's been, I can't tell you how much work there has been by Sally, the comms team, the stakeholder engagement team, Stu and others in getting all of this together in a really quite tight timescale. So I think that the materials and the way it's all set out look fantastic. So my gratitude to them. Also been making some really good progress. Something I've really enjoyed over the summer has been working with the senior management teams of each of the service directorates to come up with a narrative about how, adult community mental health contributes to the Oxleas strategy, and it's been really nice gathering those views and putting them together into a 2 or 3 page document. So we've got a meeting with ALD on the 18th, but other than that, we've got near final documents for all of the service directorates that we can then test on staff and really get that engagement. And we're going to be doing it for the professions too, and for each of the corporate directorates. That'll be a little bit later in October. But most of all, what I wanted to get your views on was around the governance and the monitoring arrangements. So for the last strategy, we weren't explicit about the role of committees in overseeing different elements of the strategy, and we want to be for that. We've come up with a kind of proposal as to how that might look. And our view is that the committees could be setting their own timetable for when they want to look at different elements. And there could be formal reporting to the board alongside our 3A's document that shows the progress that's being made in those particular areas of the strategy. And then for there also to be fuller updates at strategy meetings of the board to look at those particular elements. And we've come up with a proposed regularity for those. So most of all, I'd like to hear from you is, does that feel like the right approach? Are there any changes you'd like to see? And do you like that reporting template, or would you like it to look a little bit differently? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Any? Jo?
Really like the approach, really like the the work with the directorates about how their work fits in, because I think that's really important, that whatever job you're doing, you can actually connect it to the strategy. Oh, excuse me. On the reporting format, I just wanted more KPIs, kind of a bit more enshrined in it. I realise on our update it says, you know, you can share some data, but I think it's really important that for each key commitment we have in the strategy, we have some key KPIs. I think we've got that. I think that needs to be somehow appended to that document. You know, I like the wording of it, areas to celebrate, areas for attention. That's all great, but we must keep hold of that KPI. And I must admit, during the strategy updates that we've had over the last couple of years, it felt, I felt that we didn't always have that big picture about we were here, we're trying to get to here. So I think that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne.
I'd echo Joe in saying I think this is a really improved approach towards the governance over the strategy. I think I noticed, I expected that there would be a lot for the Quality Committee to look at, and I noticed the number of them. Vicky and I have had a discussion about how we might tackle the agenda in the Quality Committee, and we're going to experiment with this, and we're happy to share the outcomes. But we're thinking that in the way in which we structure our monthly agenda, we'll structure it according to the strategic priorities for the committee, so that it will serve two purposes. One, to help us to report in terms of the strategic direction, but it will also serve as a sort of constant reminder of how the work that we're discussing in the Quality Committee is contributing to the overall direction of travel. So fingers crossed that that will give the strategic elements a bit more of a sort of higher profile in our discussion.
Thank you. Sophie.
Yeah, I would echo what Joe and Suzanne said, particularly about the journey and being able to measure where we are on that. I had a specific question about partnerships, which I can see is going to the Partnerships Committee. As we don't currently have an Oxleas Partnerships Committee, is that the SLP? Is that the committee in common? Because given that partnerships is cutting across everything that we do, I think it might be more helpful to have a specific place for it.
Yes, so it's actually the executive and the partnerships committee. So we do have a partnerships committee, but it meets as a committee in common with the SLP.
Yeah.
So that's one of the areas that it would be looking at this area. But because the partnerships is so cross-cutting across the business of the organisation, we were thinking that mainly it would be the focus would be at the executive, and the executive then could report up to the board. And I think it would be something that we would then also talk about at the strategic away days as well.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could have one more comment, and then Rachel, if you want to sweep up anything you wish to respond to. I like it very much. I think it's very good. Is there a space, or should there be a space, for the individual committees responsible for a periodic process to actually look at their bit of the strategy and refresh their bit, not refresh the strategy, but refresh their plan for the strategy, look outside the window and see what's going on elsewhere and whether there are any lessons to be learned to set the plan for the next year? I'm not thinking now, but I'm thinking in terms of 2026 for 2027.
Generally, we've had a kind of a yearly review of where we are, and then we can kind of see if we want to adjust. I prefer it to be a living document, really, where we kind of keep our eye on the prize, but we nevertheless recognise that that's going to need to be. Things change a lot within a year. So yes, I think we had a yearly review.
Do that to some extent within their domain. Thank you. Anything else from the other comments that you may feel that?
Only that I think the idea of having the KPIs actually attached to the document kind of at the back, so that everybody keeps referring to those, and we specifically mention, get the committee to list them at the top, I think would be an easy addition and would keep that in focus. Thanks.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much, and really looking forward to the launch. It looks very good. Congratulations to the team, not only producing the strategy, which is what we congratulate the people on, but actually converting it now into a output that is really usable. Abby.
Just had a comment around KPIs. I think we just needed a bit more discussion so it doesn't become repetitive, because there'll be some of those metrics that will be within the performance report. And maybe what we need to look at is something I was discussing with Suzanne earlier, linking it to the strategy rather than having another set of metrics. So in the but I'll think it through and then have a discussion.
Yeah. Might be around thinking what's the key business questions, where the KPIs flow from might be helpful. Thank you. So thank you for the team on that one, and we can all look forward to receiving our goodie bag in the post, I'm sure.
We don't get one.
We don't get one. There we go. There we go. There's something there. Ian, operational report.
Thank you very much, Chair. So in the report, you've got highlights from each of the directorates and some detail in the reading room. I wasn't going to go over those, but happy to take questions. I did highlight three kind of more thematic concerns, which I just wanted to bring to the board's attention. One of those was a set of outreach, which I think we've probably covered off now. So if I may, I will just focus on the other two. And then there were a couple of verbal updates. Apologies, these were in the reports that myself and Neil wanted to quickly do in acknowledgement of the fact that this is Steve's last formal board, and these are two areas where he has been heavily involved. So if I just start with the first couple of thematic reviews. The first is around prisons. I mean, Andrew, you talked, I think before the meeting, or actually no, in your chair's update, at how quickly the world has been moving in the last few months, and that is certainly the case when it comes to prisons and the delivery of healthcare in prisons. The government has made good on its promise of a temporary reduction of the time sentence for those on a standard determinate sentence. What this means is that we are experiencing now a plan to release early quite a number of prisons nationally. And the prisons that we work in have received that data, and we are preparing the work that is necessary for a safe release, which is alongside the continual work to receive people into a prison setting. And I have acknowledged in the report the fact that with the recent civil unrest, that has led to a temporary increase in the volume of new sentences, leading to further pressure on the prison estate. And I seem to remember reading, whether this is accurate or not, in the press at the beginning of last week, that there was only something like 100 places left within the prison estate. So what that means in terms of healthcare, I mean, I've set some other things out in the report, but as I've already said, it means an increase in the numbers of releases and receptions, and therefore a corresponding workload for healthcare. We've talked previously, I think, as a board, certainly as an exec, around the fact that HMP Dartmoor is currently closed, with the majority of our staff temporarily redeployed elsewhere in Devon. However, we have been retaining a skeletal staff group there on the basis that it may need to be stood up at short notice due to the fact that there is this pressure in the system at the moment. But as it stands, we have no indication that that is something that the MOJ is considering. The other thing, a couple of things I wanted to highlight in relation to prisons. First, that HMP Cookham did finally open on the 19th of August, and the first tranche of prisoners have been received there. We did secure the controlled drugs license prior to it opening, which was good. And then the last point was just around quality in prisons. And I won't go into detail about this because we may come back to it in quality committee reports. But we've a number of our sites that we work into have received inspections or re-inspections over the last few months. We've seen some positive results for Bristol, Swaleside and the Verne. However, not so positive results for both Earlstoke and Rochester. And both of these are in the context of a very challenged kind of prison setting, with Rochester now being subject, as I understand it, to an urgent notification. And then the second thing I just wanted to raise was around mental health in UEC. We continue to see lots of national and regional focus on mental health in emergency departments. There are two kind of areas that there's been a particular focus on in London. One is looking to eliminate the number of 72-hour breaches that are attributable to mental health. As I said in the report, for Oxleas, this is a relatively rare occurrence, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. But generally, we average around 2 or 3 such scenarios per month. However, that isn't necessarily reflected in other parts of the system. So we are being asked, as are other providers, to really focus in on addressing this. The bottom line that generally impacts on long lengths of stay in ED, certainly for adults, remains bed availability and flow, often complicated by patients being in an ED which is not adjacent to their local mental health services. So that can be a complicating factor. But personally, I feel flow is the main reason. For CAMS, it's a slightly different picture. It's less often, although can be attributable to access to a mental health bed, but more generally, it's about complex social picture. We are making sure that we're doing everything we can to try and resolve situations so that they don't hit this threshold. And certainly escalations are working much better than they have been previously. And we seem to be responding pretty well to them. I think I said in the report that South East London are also doing their own review of some of the longest waits that we've experienced in the last month or so, which we are participating in to look at kind of system learning from that. And then the second thing, just briefly about mental health in the UEC, we all providers were written to by Martin McRae and Angela Murdoch regarding the increase that there has been in the last few months of Section 136 conveyances to ED. Colleagues will remember that when we brought in the 136 hubs, which is the kind of colloquial term for the mental health clinical advice lines, we did start to see a reduction in the number of conveyances. And this was alongside right care, right person coming in at the same time. However, the data is pretty stark around the proportion of conveyances in recent months that are going to ED rather than a dedicated health-based place of safety. And alongside that, there's some really, really very surprising data about the utilisation of dedicated health-based place of safety. We've had some discussions, certainly been having discussions internally and with the ICS, and we are putting in our own submission around our Oxleas and SLAM health-based place of safety utilisation. But also I'm working with the other provider trusts in London to try and put a collective response back to NHSE, which basically conveys the fact that we take this very seriously. We acknowledge that we have something to do about this, but also there is an element of it which probably relates to other parts of the system, particularly the Met, but also it may raise a question around how health-based place of safeties are utilised. To give you an example, a trust in another part of London recently converted all 8 of their health-based place safety beds into acute beds, which has a significant knock-on effect on capacity available to the system. But also, I think there is a question around, which I think collectively we might put back, around whether we have enough dedicated health-based place of safety spaces across the capital. So I think, Andrew, I should probably stop there before I do the kind of final 2 items which I mentioned, which were around veterans and volunteers, but I'm happy to take questions on those points.
Thank you, Ian. Questions and comments, Joe?
One of my questions was about whether we recognise the section 136 and 8 and the health-based place of safety data, and I'm saying, on what I'm hearing is partially. So I'd be interested to get updates on that as we go through. Couple of other points. On page 61 of the bundle, we talk about the mental health hubs. Do we have clear data that shows things are better with the hubs, is my question. And then my final point comes back to the prison early release scheme. And I'm not sure there's any answers, but getting the prisons to understand how important it is that we do as much as possible with these prisoners. So we had a presentation at Mortality Review. When people leave prison, it's a very vulnerable time for them. Certainly, we know drug use is an issue, but even where we have prisoners on medication, prisoners don't have GPs, they're not registered with a GP. We all know finding a GP, registering a GP is pretty difficult, and then getting an appointment within a matter of a few days. So anything we can do to make those points known to the system, and whether we can intervene to help prisoners set up GP appointments or register for GPs before they leave prison, something like that, I just think would be really useful. It worries me that we could have a spate of real serious incidents on the back of this. Thank you.
Ian, do you want to respond to that one?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the early release scheme, Joe, I absolutely agree with your concerns. The good news is that we have had significant notice of around the patients being released in September and October. So we have had some notice to be able to do some of that preparatory work. A lot of that preparatory work does sit with healthcare, but some of it does sit elsewhere in the prison. So I think we kind of strive to do the best that we can in the circumstances. I think you're right to highlight that recent case, because I think that does, I think it does show the significant challenge that we face, and I think this will potentially have an impact on other parts of Oxleas, for example, because obviously people will be released back who are kind of BBG natives and who will be coming back to our boroughs. And in fact, we had such a situation at the end of last week where a prison in the home counties released somebody. They came to ED in considerable mental distress. And then we had to work with the local mental health trust to try and get them into a bed as quickly as possible. So I think some of the mitigation for that is, as part of the early release schemes, working with the NHSE clinical cell to really lobby that we need to prioritise tasks which support safe early release. And that might mean standing down some of the other things that we are measured against temporarily, obviously thoughtfully, not everything. And then I think the other thing is about the involvement of ICSs, particularly local authorities, in this as part of the scheme. So I think all of that is getting much greater focus. But I think you're right. It's still there are some concerns that remain. In terms of the hubs, I guess it would be good to kind of understand a bit more about how you define working well. I think there are, on a number of indicators, we're seeing really good successes in that we think that the people that need secondary care are now coming to secondary care, and people who don't are successfully being directed to other parts of the system to get their needs met. I think one of the challenges is that each of the hubs works within a place-based system. Each of those places is quite slightly different in terms of how the partners we work with are commissioned, etc. So I think there are always going to be slight variations between boroughs, but I don't know if Lorraine, as you're here, you wanted to kind of add anything from your perspective.
I think you've said it all, to be honest, Ian. I don't think there's anything to add.
I guess my question is, you obviously feel you've got some data, but is that data something that can be shared? Or is it just a feeling? So is it evidence? You know, how do you know what you think you know? If that makes sense.
I mean, I think we've got good data around the impact on referral flows. I mean, in terms of outcomes for individual, I think one of the challenges that up and down, and this is experienced up and down the country, is that as people who previously perhaps access secondary care now access other parts of the system, how do you capture the data around their outcomes in a more longitudinal way? And I think, Lorraine, that is a conversation that is still live with our partners. Is that right?
And we've made some really good progress with Mind, actually, and we've just seen a first cut of some combined outcome data, which is going to be pretty critical, I think, going forwards in terms of showing, you know, the interventions aren't now just delivered by clinicians. We can't measure outcomes in the same way that we've traditionally measured outcomes, but joining together that kind of patient pathway and being able to provide an outcome that shows the totality of that pathway is pretty important. But it's also really complicated in terms of IT systems and governance, but we're just beginning to see that, and it's been really helped by the fact that we've got, you know, our partnership working is really strong around those hubs, and people have really committed to using single outcome measures, despite the fact that I think we were being driven initially to have separate, you know, organisational outcomes. So we're all using dialogue, we're all using goal-based outcomes, and that obviously makes the task a lot easier. But getting to a position where we have a nice dashboard is just a little way off.
Thank you. Any more questions for Ian? Thank you. And clearly some of these are going to run. It feels that actually the health-based place of safety, these 136 suites, we're going to have to look at a system level as well, really, and understand what's going on there. And maybe that's something we need to refer to the system to do. Thank you. Board visit reports. We have a large number. So,
sorry.
I do apologise. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I do apologise, Ian.
Apologies for butting in, Andrew.
No, quite right, quite right.
I just wanted to quickly give a kind of brief update around the Trust commitment to armed forces, and then I think Neil will just say something briefly about our commitment to working with volunteers. And the reason, I mean, it's something that I periodically raise as part of the operational report. But as I said, Steve has been kind of very closely involved with both of these, and has helped us kind of really move both these items on very significantly in time that he's been here. So for armed forces, I just wanted to say that in the last few months we appointed, and she's now started, Irene Cowling as our Veteran and Armed Forces Coordinator. This is now a substantive current post. Irene brings a lot of energy as the spouse of somebody serving in the armed forces. And she's really building on the work that Lorraine Jones, a colleague from Greenwich Time to Talk, started many years ago. The work around armed forces, people remember, came out of a very tragic incident within our mental health services in Greenwich many years ago, and really caused us to think about what our offer is, particularly around people initially who have a mental health condition that may or may not be related to their service. And on the back of that, we have developed good access policies for adult mental health. We signed up to the Covenant. We are accredited for what we do. And we're now at a point in time where we are undergoing re-accreditation. We have to submit something on the 1st of November. And so in support of that, we are looking at refreshing our access policies across the range of services that we provide. And we're also developing a 3-year strategy around the re-accreditation, which very much is part of the overall trust strategy and links to some extent our work around health inequalities. And just to pick up the point from a couple of non-exec colleagues, we're also refreshing our KPIs so that we're very clear on our measures of success. So I think it's a really, really good news story and a huge journey that we've undergone. And I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that journey, but also just to give you a kind of an update on where we're at. And I'll hand over briefly to Neil just to say something about volunteering.
Thanks, Ian. It's been a little over a year since we had a focus on volunteering as part of the Involve report, but Steve has been really helpful in helping us think about how to quantify some of this. Obviously, volunteers bring many, many different types of values, but one way of looking at it is to look at the number of hours and to use the minimum wage just to tot up what that would cost if we were to do that. So just to look back over the last 4 months, I can tell you that we had 10,500 hours of volunteering at Oxleas in a range of different things, from telephone befriending, meet and greeters. We have people now helping us with the equalities work, recording ethnicity data in all sorts of areas, really just adding enormous value. If we were to apply the minimum wage to that and look at that over the year, that would, and taking out expenses, that would equate to £369,000. And as I say, that's one measure of value. That's not, of course, the only value, but it's a thriving area of Involve. And I think because we have the Involve infrastructure, we've been allowed to, in a position to apply for different grants. So we're pleased to say that we've recently been involved in the £550,000 grant for 3 years from the Volunteers Without Barriers. We're a participant in that for South East London, so we can increasingly grow this, and I think that's valuable for us, valuable for volunteers.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, and thanks, Ian. Volunteers, first of all, it has been a fantastic success story. Chaplain Kaur is the one who has immediate contact, and if any of you get a chance to attend one of her induction courses for new volunteers, it is so professionally run, and it's a very successful recruitment program. As Neil rightly said, we put a value on it probably about 6 years ago or so. And I'm not aware any other trust does that, actually, but I do think it's a very meaningful way of demonstrating the value and the huge commitment. And by the end, as Neil said, by the end of the year, probably around 25,000 hours will be given to us by volunteers. And the other thing I'll just say about the Armed Forces Covenant, as Ian's touched on, that's now won the gold award a couple of years back. But it isn't just about the armed forces, because the training work that's done, particularly around PTSD, does affect other programs. So a wide range of services and patients have benefited from that first work that was done. And as Ian said, all came out of the JW inquiry back in 2017. But that training, I'm going by the figures that Lorraine Jones produced, that started out with 3 people. Carl Knopp, Lauren Jones and Ian Reynolds. And through the training, so we had 3 people who had that specialist knowledge, and through the training that they put together, we've now got over 300. So, you know, the change has been huge and recognised in the various awards that we've won. So I think it's, been a great success, everyone involved in it. And I think, as Ian said, it'll go on even further and better now. And thanks to all those people who've been a part of it.
At the risk of sounding trite, it's a question of acorns leading to trees, leading to forests, isn't it? Which is really good, really positive story. That, thank you for that. And again, when we're going back to the beginning in our reflection session, talking about positive stories, to tell people there are positive stories there that we should remember and be willing to bring out to people when we're talking about what we do and the NHS. Thank you. Ian, is there anything you wish to add at this stage? No, thank you very much. Can we move on to the board visit reports? I'll invite people to remember that people have had a chance to read it. So if you could bring out the major themes of your visit, anything that you think should be brought to attention. And I've tried to, because I find it difficult to read it on the screen, I've tried to list all the reports out, but if I've got it wrong, jump in. Joe and Jane, you did community in the community forensic team.
Yes, no particular issues arising here. Really inspirational, multidisciplinary team, actually. And, you know, a really good news story that I'm sure the newspapers wouldn't really want to tell. You're working with people who've been in secure services, a lot of whom started in high secure over decades, and working with them as they come into the community through, particularly into the Tilton Mariposa House. Really interesting. You see, they've started their own physical health clinics. I could push back and go, should they have had to do that? Because, you know, perhaps others ought to have been doing that, but they've seen a really good uptake in terms of people coming to that, really important. There was one thing which isn't in the report which really struck me. We're talking to the team and saying one of the things that they have to work with these clients is what to do when you're bored. You know, because you know, they've always had so much structure and I guess lack of choice in terms of what they do. But back in the day, when they got bored was potentially when they also got into trouble. So, you know, working with people about that, because they're going to have more free time. You can also see the success we've had of some of these people coming back into Oxleas through service user involvement as well. So it was a really good visit, wasn't it, Jane? Really good.
The administrator was outstanding. Everyone spoke so highly of her. I just thought it's worth mentioning.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve and Azra, Greenwich early intervention and psychosis.
So I'm going to keep this brief. This was a really excellent team. We had a really good visit. We tried to delve into some of the things that had actually resulted in why they were so successful. So I think it was very much about shared purpose, excellent leadership, and definitely a voice for voice that I've just realised I've not got my mind. Definitely everybody in the team had a voice. And what was really excellent, I think, is after having a discussion with the senior management team, we went out and actually spoke to a group of people in the regular staff members, and they reflected that back. And really in terms of the support they had from the senior team. So I think that was the key element, but it was the recipe for success is what I would say is really what we came away with, which are themes that I think would be useful to try and make sure that we can replicate in other areas. But I would reflect, they have a defined small caseload. So if you were to then expand that into some place where they've got very high caseloads, I think it's a different environment.
But I think it is important when we pull out the lessons learned annually, which I know we do, we pull out the positive as well as the quotes, negative lessons, unquote. Steve, do you want to add anything?
I think there are some great quotes in there of what people have said. I particularly draw your attention to Gary, and I'm not sure what Gary's title actually is, Azra, but when we were in conversation with the wider group audience, and he said about that he was we are investing in your management skills. And I just thought it was such a lovely way to encourage staff to say that they really got value out of being with us. The other quick thing I would mention is just give a shout out to the graduate scheme, which I think Lorraine Regan was very heavily involved in. And we hear this constantly about how successful it was, but particularly this team, they've got some great people through it.
Thank you. Ian, you wanted to come in?
Well, just because people have mentioned Gary, I mean, Gary is an Oxleas success story. I met Gary, 15 years ago. He was a student, and he's gone from being a student to being a community mental health nurse, and now a team manager. And I think he's a fantastic example of how you grow your own successes within trust. He's a brilliant clinician and a brilliant leader. And from my point of view, nicely idiosyncratic as well.
Thank you. So moving on, Sophie, I think you are the representative for acute and crisis at Tarn and Shepherd's Lee.
Yes, thank you. And this seems to have come across in note form. I thought I saw a more written up version, but I might be wrong. We went to see the Tarn and Shepherd Lee's ward in Oxleas House, two very interesting wards. At the Tarn, we were reflecting on the journey that's been made over the past year in terms of how staff feel and general security. The work on relational security has been really strong there, and we've seen that in the outcomes. But interestingly, staff still felt that their security wasn't as strong as it could be. And I think that was an interesting perception. There were conversations about male versus female ratios, about night staffing. So that was interesting and something to take away. There was also the perception that because there wasn't a seclusion area in place, staff felt less safe, even though less patients needed that seclusion area. Just the fact that it was there would make them feel safe. So there were some interesting thoughts on that. We also had some very interesting conversations with patients as well as staff, and that was another reflection. Yeah, Ian was asked to get into a shower at one point to see if the water was hot, and he politely declined, but did test all. But we came away with, well, I came away with, certainly with the perception that staff felt that orientation for patients was covered. Patients maybe didn't feel that they were getting all that information when they were going through that orientation process. And we did reflect on experience-based co-design, which I know Neil has delivered before, and how that could be an area to explore for that ward. With Shepherd Lee's, this is an older adults ward, but there were working age adults on that ward as well. And one thing we came away from Shepherd Lee's feeling was that this is a ward that gets on with it. They do a really good job. They keep their heads down. And as a consequence, as we've mentioned previously, they may not get that much recognition because they do just get on with it. And staff reflected they would like to be celebrated. So that could be through a comms piece. They would also like the very complex nature of their work acknowledged by other teams. So we've also tried to reflect that in the actions here. And as you will see, we asked them if they had any requirements for estates. And there is a very long list there of things that came up, which was really interesting. And staff felt empowered to ask about things I don't think that they would have raised otherwise, because they were just putting their heads down and getting on with it. And we hope as a result, a lot of the smaller things that seem small but are actually really important to staff wellbeing will be addressed. So Ian, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I think you've captured it really, really well, Sophie. Thank you. I mean, I think the estates, there were a number of issues and they are listed at Shepherd Lee's. I mean, colleagues will know that because of the PFI, particularly at Oxleas House, some of what can appear to be and smaller issues, but fundamental ones, the smaller things can take a while to get going. But I think as part of the board visit, the directorate, myself, together with Rachel, who was there with us, said we would give this some kind of renewed focus.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve and Lorraine on Bromley, older age and memory.
Lorraine, shall I go first?
Yeah.
Yep. Enjoy going to the Bromley Memory Clinic. Through various people I know, or families I should say, I know locally, they do a fantastic job. All very positive. Some interesting aspects did come out of it in terms of the demographic changes that they're experiencing because people at a younger age are suffering from memory issues. And those of us within the SLP, there was a plan at some stage for SLP to have a young dementia program across London, but I don't think that ever took off. But it has required, because that cohort of people that they're receiving is changing a little bit, more training to be required to meet that change. So basically a very good visit. The one issue that cropped up was around the toilet. I hate to mention it, but basically they got 2 toilets there for the public. The staff one works very well. One of those is out of action, so at least one working. And they were giving us an example recently. They had, I think it was 50 people, 50 patients in the building using the one toilet, which clearly doesn't work. And although we didn't quite get to Ian's stage of being tempted to step into a shower, the water flow in the one, I hate to say all this, the water flow in the one toilet that was allegedly working was as slow as you could possibly imagine. To fill that glass would take 20 minutes. I know we are dealing with it, but I think Lorraine would say the same thing. It just was really unacceptable. And for a visitor, for a patient or a visitor, it would ruin the whole visit. It really would. Lorraine, I don't know if you've got an update on it, but we shouldn't have facilities as bad as that.
No, estates are very much kind of on it. We're just waiting for an update from the contractors, but it's in hand. It just is very unfortunate for all the reasons that Steve outlined. I think what really balanced that on that visit was an incredibly kind of moving account from one of the team leaders of how she has experienced Oxleas in terms of an organisation that really lives its values, which I thought was really nice. And she had a very specific reason for sharing that story around her own health and how that had been received in another organisation. So it was particularly good to hear, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's important that these small things actually are typed up because they have a big impact on people, on individuals. So thank you. And hopefully that will get sorted soon. Joe and Jane, Memorial and Greenwood.
Yeah, Greenwood and Hazelwood. Yeah, so as you can see, it wasn't the most satisfying visit. We were it was the Friday before the bank holiday, and I think there'd also been an incident. So we've already rebooked to go. I think the one thing for me that came out of it was it's low secure, so they have a relatively low level of incidents, but they can have incidents, and the staff were comparing themselves to at the Bracton that if an incident happens and someone presses the button, then they're likely to get one person from each of the other wards to come to the ward to help. Whereas here there's only 2 wards, so they might get one person coming. And that on occasion, I think, made them feel quite vulnerable. Not sure there's an awful lot we can do, but the modern matron, I think, said something similar that, he worries more about incidents there than he does at the Bracton.
Okay, thank you. So any themes emerging from that we need to take forward as a whole? I think there are lots of individual actions which are fed into the executive system, so can be taken forward. But I think that seemed to be a really good set of visits and helpful insights. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the committee reports. Suzanne, the Equality Committee.
Thank you. Colleagues will have seen from the length of the Equality Committee report that it's been quite a busy couple of months, which included receiving 3 annual reports on behalf of the board. The things that I wanted to just comment on, the 2 alerts in relation to prisons, which Ian has already touched on. Just drawing your attention to the HMP Rochester CQC inspection. This was disappointing, given that Rochester is a long-term part of our prison service provision. That we've included here that an immediate action plan has been compiled, and having caught up with Vicky today, the CQC has seen a very detailed action plan of how we're intending to respond to the issues which have been raised. A part of the problem here is with the prison, and as Ian mentioned, I think that they either have received or are about to receive an urgent notification in relation to the prison. So it's a difficult environment to be giving good health care, but we can probably be doing better, and that's what we're aiming to do with the action plan that we've put in place. In terms of the directorate feedback, I think one of the problems with trying to summarise the directorate feedback is that you get a set of sort of rather random points. I just wanted to assure people that underlying the selection of points which are included highlighted in each of those areas of the 2 directorates, community mental health and acute and crisis, what the committee actually receives is a very systematic account of the outcomes of self-assessment and improving lives reviews across all of the teams in those directorates. And so what we tend to include here is just a sort of set of, as I say, what appear to be slightly random highlights of some of the discussion that we had. I think that both of the directorates can be congratulated on the amount of improvement work that they're doing, and we do tend to hear quite a lot about that in the course of their presentations, as well as real candour, I would say, in how they assess their services. The other thing I wanted to draw attention to, people have noted in the patient safety annual report, we have referred to the commencement by April 2025 of annual resuscitation training. I'm really pleased that we've been able to bring that into effect. Previously, staff have been trained on a biannual, 2-yearly basis, and so it has taken a while to ensure that we can now do that properly across the trust on an annual basis. Infection prevention and control, it's a very small team who do amazing work. I did wonder before we got the annual report and discussed it, how on earth they were managing to look at the infection prevention and control in prisons in the southwest. They have been able to increase the size of their team, so they have someone on the ground in the southwest who's able to do that work. The Mental Health Act, the Mental Health Legislation annual report, the main thing that I just want to note here is that the committee has had the benefit every year of receiving a really scrupulous and well-written report, which is prepared by Lisa Moylan. I believe that this is the last one that she was due to prepare for us prior to her retirement. I think there is a possibility that she may not disappear from the trust, but I do just want to note that the report that we get every year is always very readable, contains a lot of important data and is worth receiving. I'd like to thank Lisa for the work that she and her team do, because again, it's a very small and well-formed team. On PSERF, the one thing that I wanted to draw out from here is that this is the first report for this quarter on PSERF as it has been implemented. There is still some legacy investigations which are being done under the old system, but we're moving now towards being fully PSERF, if I can put it that way. One of the interesting discussions that the committee has been having with the PSERF oversight team is understanding the nature of patient and carer experience of the process that is effected after there has been an incident. And we have had a discussion with them about how difficult it can be to get appropriate understanding of those experiences. They're a relatively small number, but they're hugely varied, and the experience can extend from the immediate learning that there has been harm right up to the point at which there's been an inquest, and we've been supporting families through the inquest. So it's not a simple matter of just surveying all of the carers who may have been impacted, but the team is working on bringing together an appropriate way of understanding that experience and bringing it via the PSERF oversight group to the quality committee, so that we're cited on the experience that carers are getting. The one thing I would say there is I think it's been important to the team in Oxleas to try and assure a good patient experience for a long time. It hasn't been something that they've not been interested in, but it's about systematising and understanding the patient experience and being clear ourselves as a committee that we're well cited on that. Just a couple of good things to pull out of the clinical effectiveness group. They report to us once every 3 months, and I think it's worth drawing attention to two aspects of what they've reported: the development around research and knowledge, and the work that's being done by that team, which I think is really gearing up, and the work that's continuing on being able to understand better our outcomes. And then the last thing I just wanted to draw to your attention is that we received what was a very moving report on end-of-life care, and it included a film which had been made for one of the Inspire events. And I think it's clear that the commitment that our nursing team has to providing really optimal end-of-life care, both to patients and to their families, really shone through in the presentation they did.
Thank you, Suzanne. I guess Rochester is something that we need to think about at the top. Obviously, we're pulling together the action plan now. Abby, how easy is it going to be remediated, and how much of a surprise were those findings, do you think?
We're aware of the issues that had been highlighted. It's how we sustain the improvements that we put in place. And I think that's something we're going to have to look at, and how we work better with the prison regime. Because some of it is about estate, some of it is about how they support us in delivering some of the things that need to be delivered within healthcare. And I think it's just about much more collaboration rather than saying you need to do this. I don't think that is going to help us in terms of trying to sustain things. So that's what we're going to work towards. Vicky is here. I did see Lorraine and I saw the action plan yesterday and signed it off. So, and the question we asked was, would we be able to deliver, and the due dates that were put in the plan, and the work is already ongoing. So we're quite confident that we will.
Thank you, Ian.
I think Abby's probably got a more up-to-date kind of sense of things. So I won't kind of say anything more, apart from the fact that I think the criticisms that are specifically of healthcare are in particular areas of delivery, and then there are some issues highlighted around governance. But I'm pretty confident, unless Abby and Lorraine tells me, that I think what has been submitted and been signed off will go some way to reassuring the CQC. But yeah, we've got work to do.
Thank you. Any other questions for Suzanne? No. Joe, then thank you very much. Thank you for the work, and a lot of work, as you already highlighted on that committee. There was a lot of meat in that report, that report, which did it. So thank you very much for you and the whole team for doing that one. Business and infrastructure, Joe.
Yes, happy to take the report as read. I was just going to highlight just a small number of things. We had no alert items, which I think is good. The finances are on plan, huge amount of work going on underneath that. So keep it up, but we're in a good state. We signed off the agency tiering paper that is in part 2, but the Business and Infrastructure Committee were happy with that. On the other thing I was going to highlight was just on Southwest Prisons, where we received a detailed report following the cost overruns last year. And we are, as the report here says, operating currently within our means. That doesn't necessarily mean that all issues have been solved. And we are certainly still operating less than establishment headcount. And if we were at establishment, financially, that would be more problematic because we've got some other things, other actions that haven't quite delivered on where we hope they would do. But generally in a much better position than the previous year. And clearly we will keep an eye on it. We also had an update on that sort of financial metric for across all prisons as well, which I think was very helpful. That's all I was going to highlight. More than happy to take questions, which I will probably refer to Azra.
Questions for routing? Ian.
Sorry, not a question, but a comment. Just to further what Joe has said about Southwest Prisons. We, as in the directorate and myself, have a regular kind of quarterly meeting with the local commission team. This one coming up in October. And I think our relationship with them remains good, but there are areas of disagreement which relate to the financial what we deliver. As part of the work that Joe's already mentioned and has come to the committee, we are in the process of working out what we can do safely without reducing quality, but trying to live within our financial means. And I think that's potentially going to be quite a difficult conversation. So I have asked yesterday that the directorate starts pulling on plans together to meet with exec directors ahead of that date, which is at the beginning of October, so that we have an aligned position which covers off kind of what we're prepared to do and not do in the future.
Thank you. Questions? No? Thank you very much, and thank you again, Joe and Azra, for the work of that group. People Committee, Nina.
I was actually away, so Sophie very kindly stepped in.
I did
and is going to do the
Sophie,
update. Thank you.
over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give an overview, but then invite Rachel to comment if there's anything that I've missed out. So we received the revalidation of medical doctors' annual report, which you'll see is included in the bundle. We accepted this report. I just want to double check if this now needs to be accepted by the board, or has it been delegated to People Committee?
Yes, it does.
So
okay.
On the recommendation of the People Committee.
What we recommend accepted. Yeah.
So the recommendation is that we accept that report of revalidation. Are we happy to accept that? I'm seeing nods around the table, so we are. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So that was the main piece of assurance. There were no alerts. As you'll see, we received also the Health and Safety Annual Report and Strategy. Really interesting focus on incident investigation, learning and collaboration. We also received a very interesting update on the graduate scheme, which has been mentioned earlier. It was really nice to hear an example of where that's really working. And there was some great feedback on that. And just to pull out as well, one thing which has been discussed previously at board and at committee around the fire safety officer. This was previously an agency post. We now have a person in a full-time, in a fixed term contract on that, which is really good news, given our previous concerns. So that's all I wanted to pull out there. But Rachel, if you've got anything to add, that'd be great.
It's only tiny. It's just to note that when well, it's big, is that Wendy Lyon, who's been such a huge part of Oxleas for decades and decades and made such a difference to staff experience, has retired. But I just think we should note the contribution that she made.
So can we note that in the minutes? That would be, and our gratitude. That would be good. Let her know and drop a note to her. And when you talked about the fire officer, lots of smiles and thumbs up around the table that you might not have been able to see from that distance. But there was any questions for Rachel and Sophie on this? No, thank you. Audit and risk assurance, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. 4 points from me to raise. First of all, in terms of total risks, there was on first sight a disproportionate number coming from offender healthcare, but in subsequent work after the meeting and looking at those risks in a lot more detail, it turns out that on a local level, particularly in the Southwest, they've been looking to please everybody by declaring risks that the Inspector of Prisons would pick up, CQC visits would pick up, and we would pick up. So in fact, that level will decline. That risk list is going to be pruned so that it's more Oxleas focused, and so that looks less dramatic than it will be. Second point, bit of a shock at the audit committee. We actually had an internal audit recommendation that hadn't been completed and was overdue. And I don't think we remember that having one like that for a long, long time. But that just shows that, and it was overdue through no fault of ours. It was actually an external party. I only mention it because, again, great credit to the executive at Oxleas. It is a rare occasion. And certainly compared to elsewhere, I can tell you that not many people have recommendations completed so quickly, accurately, and on time as we do. Third point, thanks to the Quality Committee and Suzanne and the team for their presentation of their risks. As we've already touched on in this meeting, we had a long discussion on the triangle of care and that coming on, that rightly coming onto the board, as if he has said, with some further work to be done around measures of success and the mitigation plans. And also, I think it was very good to see that in terms of turnover of risks at the BAF, I mean, there is a danger that we could perhaps keep the risks on, some of the risks on for too long, and in fact, they're business as usual, and possibly district nursing could have been in that category. I think it was our longest term risk, but in fact, Quality quite right. A Quality Committee have recognised that that can now come off the BAF, so that was good. So thank you, Suzanne. And then fourth and final point is in respect to the legal services report. This has become a lot more detailed in a good way over the years. I think if you go back 5-6 years, we had very little information on our legal services claims, but it has become better and better and much more informed. It's very interesting to see that 63% of the claims we make no payment at all. So most of them, for various reasons, aren't successful. It's interesting when you go back a few years, probably 3-4 years, we would have about 15 claims a year, and now it's running at about 48. So the actual number of claims has gone on quite a lot. But it's also useful that our contributions to NHS resolution is a very successful scheme, which covers the bulk of the cost. So claims going up, but most of them, in fact, don't arise in any payment for us. Notwithstanding, of course, we've got to acknowledge there's a considerable resource involved in dealing with those matters. So happy to take any questions.
Questions for Steve? Again, I think the audit committee sets these solid foundations for what we do. So good to hear that we're late once in a blue moon for recommendation. It's somebody else's fault. That's good. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for all of your work on that, which hasn't yet finished. Thank you. I am reporting on the board of the Council of Governors update, which is forward-looking because it's mostly forward-looking because it's things done. I'll take it as read. We'll know about the NED Nominations Committee, lead governors. I think it's worth noting, which I think is really healthy, that we actually have an election for the lead governor, which I think is healthy that we have that. And other than that, I think it is routine. We have a Council of Governors meeting coming up fairly soon, which will. Questions? No, thank you. Okay, so we'll now go on to committee effectiveness. And first of all, a review of how we did today as a committee. I'll just open it up first of all. I suppose two questions. Was this committee run in a way or operate in a way that was conducive to good discussions? And I guess perhaps even more importantly, were we effective? Did we scrutinise the things that we were that you feel, is there something that you feel that we're not covering or that we are not actually going in great enough depth of? Should we do less material deeper or keep this breadth? And I think we should be doing that discussion in the sight, of course, that a lot of the work of this committee has been pre-done by the subcommittees of the board. So any thoughts about either how the committee ran or how effective we were here? Jim.
Just a comment really, compared to some top, just find that the board papers are much more succinct. So I get an overview, I think we, in some sense, the scrutiny to the committees, which I think is correct. Previously, I'd see the same paper 3 times sometimes. And then I won't comment at one of them. So I find it a lot more efficient, the way we're doing it. I feel that we've got the breadth and we have the detail coming out of the committees. And we're all, I think that, and also the cross-referencing between committees is very good. So I just think it's coming together. So I do commend that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Was it helpful having the reflection at the beginning of that sort? Okay, I'm getting a yes on that one. So we will keep something going. The forward agenda is tabled. If anybody has any comments on it, please bring them up. Or if when you look at them in detail, send them to, I guess, myself or Sally or Sally, both of us. Please do so. Okay, if there is nothing else, we meet again in this format on Thursday, the 7th of November at 10 o'clock. Yes, please. I will. Yes, thank you.
It's just a reminder that for people that the Recognition Awards is open at the moment. So submissions are very welcome. It remains open to the 26th of September and people can see details on our website and we're looking forward to as many nominations as possible. Thank you.
And also, I think before we close, I'm out, Steve's already mentioned that this is your last formal one, but it's not going to be, we're not going to say farewell to you now because we've got the Board Development Day coming to and other events as well. But I just think it's really important that we place on the record of the formal board our thanks to you, but we will do it with more words and more warmth perhaps when we come to other events, but it's important that it's on the minutes. So thank you for all of your work, which we saw today. Okay, in that case, I'm going to bring the part 1 meeting to an end. I'm sort of assuming that behind me lunch has materialised. It has. You never know. It's one trouble with sitting in this seat. You never quite know what's happening behind you. So far, it's been quieter than some meetings. Now, I'm going to ask people, how long do you want for lunch? Half an hour?